They still work. That's what you tell yourself. The chipped mug, the cracked mirror, the broken lamp that flickers but never quite dies. They still function, so you let them stay. But what you don't realize is this: every broken thing you keep keeps a piece of you broken with it. Not loud, not dramatic, but silent and constant. And if part of you is nodding right now, not your mind, but something quieter, in the part that's tired of holding broken things, then stay. This isn't just a video. It's a space where pieces come back together. In Feng Shui, broken objects are not neutral. They hold the energy of interruption, of fracture, of things unfinished. And that energy doesn't just sit. It circulates. It echoes through your space. And over time, it distorts the flow of your qi. You feel it when focus slips, when peace feels just out of reach, when you're tired but don't know why. Today, we'll look at 5 broken object mistakes that quietly fragment your qi and what to release, so your space can finally hold you whole again. You wake not just into morning, but into a ritual you never consciously chose. A rhythm of reaching for what's been cracked, but never questioned. The chipped cup sits exactly where it always does. Not because it brings joy, not because it reflects who you are becoming, but because it's what's left, what stayed, what didn't demand replacement. And somehow, that became enough. You've run your fingers over the fracture, like someone tracing an old scar, not to remember, but because forgetting feels dishonest. You drink from it without hesitation now, without pause, and your body, gentle, loyal, silent, receives the message again. This is okay. This is what you deserve. And it starts to believe it. Not once, but every single morning. In Feng Shui, a cup is never just a cup. It is a sacred vessel, a boundary that invites nourishment and says to energy, you are safe to land here. But when that boundary is cracked, qi doesn't flow with grace. It hesitates. It splinters. It escapes in directions it was never meant to go. The moment you pour liquid into that fracture, you pour energy into a wound. And that energy doesn't settle. It trembles. It spins. It won't stay. So you begin your day with a vibration that cannot hold. And over time, your nervous system adjusts, not to stillness, but to subtle chaos. The cup looks still, but the qi inside is fleeing. The good enough. She shrinks her needs before others ask her to. The crack in the cup feels familiar, like the way she makes herself small so others can breathe. The practical. She says it's wasteful to replace it. But her body remembers how often she's been told that asking for more is selfish. The stoic. She drinks in silence, because silence is safer than admitting. She's tired of holding everything together. The repeater. she doesn't even notice the chip anymore, because she spent her whole life training her eyes to look past what hurts. It's not a cup. It's the text you didn't send, the rest you didn't take, the boundaries you didn't hold, the mornings you told yourself, "This is fine," while something deeper whispered, but it never really was. It's the echo of your usefulness, the ache of always showing up, while secretly hoping someone would tell you, "You don't have to anymore." The cup is not ceramic. It is memory. It is habit. It is a love letter to the parts of you that made broken feel normal. Neuroscience shows the brain doesn't just record stories. It records repetition. The body remembers how we treat it, even in silence, even in rituals we stop noticing. Every time you pick up that chipped cup, you repeat a neural loop, a message that says, "This is enough," even when it isn't. Your hands adjust, your breath shortens, your body calibrates to a life lived at 80%. And the worst part, you become so good at coping that you forget restoration is even possible. So before you reach for it again, pause. Let your fingers trace the crack, the way you would trace the timeline of your own becoming, and say, "Thank you for holding me when I didn't know how to hold myself." Then set it down, not because it's broken, but because you're not. Choose a new cup, not perfect, but whole. Let it say to your nervous system, "This is what receiving should feel like." Let it say to your healing, "You can start here." Let it say to your chi, "You are safe now." You stand in front of it every day, maybe in a hallway, maybe by the door. It's cracked but not shattered, distorted but not broken enough to demand action. So you look anyway, even though the reflection doesn't feel right, even though you've adjusted your angle, just enough to pretend the line across your face doesn't exist. You keep using it, not because it tells the truth, but because it's always been there. And in that quiet routine, a lie settles. This is what I look like. This is who I am. But it isn't. It never was. You've just been meeting your own gaze through something that no longer sees you clearly. In Feng Shui, mirrors are amplifiers. They don't just reflect light, they reflect truth, identity, and flow. A broken mirror doesn't just distort images. It distorts chi. It fractures the integrity of energy in a space, sending it in conflicting directions. When you look into a cracked mirror, you split your presence. You divide your field. Your energy disperses into fragments before the day even begins. And the worst part? You don't even notice, because over time, you've adjusted to being partially seen, partially understood, partially whole. The avoider. She looks fast, fixes her hair, moves on, because looking longer might reveal a version of herself she no longer recognizes. The achiever. She tilts her head to the good side, curates her reflection, adjusts posture not for pride, but to hide exhaustion she refuses to admit. The wounded one, she doesn't look anymore. Not really, because when your past is still stitched to your self-image, every reflection feels like an old scar reopened. The invisible one, she sees a blur, not because her vision is poor, but because no one ever showed her how to see herself with clarity. The mirror is not glass. It's a diary of all the times you've asked yourself, is this really me? It's the face you adjusted before walking into a room, the smile you fixed to survive the meeting, the eyes that practiced not looking tired, even when you were unraveling inside. A broken mirror is not about surface. It's about distortion of truth, of self, of what you've been taught to accept as just the way things are. And every time you pass it, you let that distortion name you again. Psychologically, mirrors are more than tools. They are portals of self-perception. Studies show daily mirror interactions influence body image, self-esteem, and emotional regulation. A cracked mirror reinforces fragmented identity. It mirrors back not just your image, but every moment of disconnection you've internalized. Your brain sees the distortion, but instead of questioning it, you adjust to it. You begin to treat fractured feedback as fact, and the body follows. You carry yourself as if you were incomplete, even when you're whole. This isn't about fixing a mirror. It's about releasing a version of you that has only ever been seen in pieces. So today, stand in front of it, just for a moment, and whisper to your reflection, I see you, even through this. Then gently turn away, not out of shame, but out of choice. Replace it, or remove it, or cover it with something that reminds you what it feels like to be seen fully. Because healing doesn't always begin with what you add. Sometimes it begins with what you're finally willing to no longer reflect. There's a clock in your home that hasn't ticked in months, maybe years. It's quiet, still, forgotten, and yet it's still there, hanging on the wall, sitting on a shelf, holding a time that no longer moves, but somehow still holds space. You don't think much about it, but every time you walk past, your energy does. It pauses. It mirrors the stillness. It echoes the question you stopped asking. Why haven't I moved? You didn't mean to stop, but something in you did. And now, time continues everywhere, except here. In Feng Shui, clocks represent rhythm, momentum, and the sacred agreement between energy and time. A broken clock interrupts that flow. It becomes a symbol of stuckness, of qi that has nowhere to go, of life that has paused without permission. Dead clocks don't just stop ticking. They trap energy, and trapped energy accumulates like dust on the spirit. Instead of circulating, qi begins to stagnate. It pools, it dulls, and slowly it tells your home, nothing is moving here. And your body believes it. The overwhelmed. She meant to fix it. But life kept piling up. Now it just hangs there. He's a reminder of everything she hasn't gotten around to. The numbed. She doesn't even notice it's stopped. She's stopped too. Somewhere between the past and what could have been, she folded into stillness. The loyal. It belonged to someone she loved. She doesn't use it, but she can't let it go. Because sometimes grief disguises itself as preservation. The delayed one. She thinks she's just waiting. But waiting has become a way of life. And the clock, a perfect alibi for why nothing's begun. The broken clock is not just a thing. It's a story of something that once worked, then didn't, and never got permission to leave. It's the job you stayed at too long. The project you never started. The chapter you promised you'd close, but left open so long it started to rot. It's the pause you turned into permanence, the temporary that became your truth. And every time you see that clock, you don't just remember time. You relive what you didn't let move. Environmental psychology shows static objects create static behavior, especially when tied to time. A dead clock sends subliminal signals to the subconscious. Nothing is changing. Nothing will. When that becomes daily background noise, you begin to act accordingly, with hesitation, with resistance, with low-grade dread that something is stuck and it might be you. And over time, you confuse stillness with failure, when all it ever was a moment you forgot to release. This isn't about fixing the clock or replacing it. It's about reclaiming movement. Today, take it down. Not in anger, not in urgency, but with reverence. Say to it, "You taught me where I paused. Now I choose to resume." And then move something. Start small. A drawer, a door, a breath. Because movement doesn't begin in the calendar. It begins in the qi. And every new tick starts with the courage to stop standing still. There's a plate you keep. Maybe just one. Maybe more. Its edge is uneven. A chip where a piece used to be. It still works. It still holds food. So you keep using it. Over and over again. You don't even flinch anymore. You place your meals gently, careful not to draw attention to the floor. But your body remembers. It notices how you prepare nourishment on something that has already broken, and still tell yourself, "This is fine." But there's a difference between gratitude and survival, between contentment and conditioning, between enough and "this is all I'll allow." In Feng Shui, plates are about receiving. They hold what fuels you. They are your invitation to abundance. A chipped plate sends a subtle but steady message. I accept lack. I normalize damage. I make do. Qi doesn't flourish in environments that apologize for themselves. And your plate, quiet and mended, becomes a silent apology you repeat 3 times a day. Scarcity energy isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like being too grateful for not enough. Sometimes it whispers, "You should be thankful. Others have less." But in healing homes, abundance isn't guilt. It's permission. The self-sacrificer, she eats last, serves herself whatever's chipped or mismatched. Because somewhere along the way, she learned that her fullness should come second. The humble one. She keeps the plate because it reminds her not to be spoiled. But what it really reminds her of is every time she had to apologize for having needs. The healer, she thinks keeping broken things is compassionate. But deep inside, she's afraid to admit she deserves more. The inherited, she never questions it. It was always there, and like so many things, she accepted it as tradition, not trauma. It's not about the plate. It never was. It's the way you lower your voice when you ask for help. It's the instinct to make do with what's offered, even when it doesn't serve you. It's the part of you that flinches at the idea of luxury. The part that equates new with too much. The way you tell yourself, "This is still good," even when it stopped feeling good a long time ago. Behavioral psychology shows our brain forms beliefs from repeated associations. Every time you prepare a meal on a chipped plate, you're not just feeding your body, you're feeding a story. A story that says, "You should be grateful for scraps. That's enough joy for today. You don't need better, you just need to behave." And over time, your nervous system doesn't just tolerate scarcity, it expects it. It calibrates to it. And worse, it distrusts abundance when it arrives. Today, don't just set the table, set the energy. Hold the chipped plate in your hands and say, "Thank you for holding what I thought I had to settle for." Then release it. Not because it failed, but because you're ready to stop anchoring your nourishment in stories of smallness. Choose a new one, something whole, not because it's expensive, but because it reminds you you deserve to be fed on something that reflects the worth of what you're becoming. It's just a light. Sometimes it flickers. Sometimes it doesn't. You've gotten used to it. You tell yourself, "It's fine, it's not urgent." But each time it blinks, your body reacts. A micro startle. A pause you didn't choose. A momentary confusion that builds slowly into fatigue. You think you're just tired, distracted, off. But maybe what's off is the signal your home is sending you over and over again. This light doesn't hold, and neither then does your focus. In Feng Shui, lighting isn't decoration. It's direction. It guides qi, invites clarity, anchors intention. Flickering light sends mixed messages to your space. It confuses the energy. It jitters. It pulses in contradiction. Instead of steady flow, how you get noise, energetic, static. Your thoughts follow suit. Your intentions scatter. And what should feel like presence feels like pressure. Focus breaks. Rest evades. And the room no longer supports your mind. It reflects its restlessness. The over-adaptive. She learns to work around it. Moves her laptop. Switches rooms. But never fixes the source. Because she's too used to adjusting herself. The minimalist martyr. She says, it's not that bad. Because brightness feels indulgent. Because somewhere, someone has no light at all. The unnoticed one. She doesn't even see the flicker anymore. Because she's learned to ignore every inconsistency that doesn't scream. The distracted. She blames her lack of focus on herself. But the truth is, her environment has been whispering disorder for months. It's not a bulb. It's how you've tolerated half light. How you've accepted a rhythm that falters and called it still workable. It's the conversation you postponed. The project you started and abandoned. The version of yourself you glimpsed, but never sustained. Every flicker is a decision. Who you delayed. A voice you silenced. A clarity you blurred. And now you wonder why you can't stay focused. Maybe it's because nothing in your space and ever stays on. Environmental design research shows inconsistent lighting triggers low-grade stress. It keeps the nervous system alert, on edge, watching for the next disruption. When your lighting flickers, oh, your mind mimics. When your surroundings are inconsistent, your clarity becomes conditional. This isn't your fault. It's your feedback loop. Your body isn't failing to focus. It's adapting to unpredictability. To heal, you don't need discipline. You need consistency. You need light that stays. Today, replace the bulb. Not because it's annoying, but because your focus is sacred. Your clarity deserves infrastructure. Say to the old flickering light, you taught me how to sit in uncertainty. But I'm ready for steadiness now. Turn on the new one and let it stay. Let the room glow without blinking. Let your nervous system finally breathe. Because true focus isn't about forcing attention. It's about trusting that your space won't dim on you when you need it most. You don't have to keep it just because it's always been there. Not everything that stays deserves to stay. Healing begins in strange places. A shelf you haven't touched in years. A drawer you open without thinking. The places that feel harmless, but quietly rearrange who you are. If something surfaced today, even a feeling, a flicker, a soft maybe, sit with it. It might be the space asking to be seen for the first time. Like this video, subscribe, or just breathe differently. The next time you walk past that one object you never questioned, and when you're ready, come with me, not into the obvious, but into the spaces that stayed quiet, simply because no one ever thought to listen. Your space speaks. Wisdom listens.